My name is Mária, but it wasn't always that way. I was born Leila into a traditional Muslim family in the Gulberg neighborhood of Pakistan. Today I'm 28 and live as a refugee with my daughter Noor in a simple little house on the outskirts of Johor. Her name means light in Urdu, and I've never heard a name so fitting. But to understand how this light entered my life, I need to go back in time, to the days when everything inside me was darkness. My childhood was surrounded by high walls, some stone, some invisible. At home, tradition was law. My father, Kareem, was a respected merchant in the Kora Bazaar, a man of firm voice and final decisions. My mother, silent and submissive, was the exact image of what was expected of us women: obedience, modesty, and invisibility. I grew up believing the outside world was not my place. I was like a flower locked in a courtyard, fragrant but forbidden to grow freely. I remember the sound of the call to prayer coming from the mosque 5 times a day. I would kneel on the carpet and recite the verses of the Quran I had known by heart since childhood. But deep down, everything felt empty. The words came out of my mouth, but the meaning slipped through my fingers like sand. They told me my destiny was already set: to marry, have children, preferably sons, and disappear under the veil of obedience. There was no room for questions, only silence. When I turned 17, my father announced my engagement to Rahim, a 32-year-old widower and successful man. It was over dinner, as the smell of homemade biryani mingled with the heaviness of my held breath. Rahim wanted a young wife to bear the children his first wife couldn't before she died in childbirth. For my father, it was a blessing. For me, a sentence. My mother said nothing. She just looked away, but her hands trembled as she poured the tea. It was as if she knew exactly what to expect, because she'd already experienced it. 6 months later, there I was, dressed in a heavy red gown, walking as if carrying a burden. My own wedding felt like a spectacle in which I was nothing more than an extra. Rahim's home was luxurious but cold. There was no affection, only duty. His mother, the matriarch, welcomed me with a clear order. Your duty is to provide this family with an heir, nothing more. I was reduced to a body with a function. My dreams, my desires, no one asked. And it was in this place, this gilded prison, that my soul began to scream silently. Little by little, a thirst grew within me, a hunger for something I couldn't even name. I didn't know what I was searching for, but I knew that what I was experiencing couldn't be all that existed. And it was then that I began to hear, ever so faintly, almost like a whisper, the name of Jesus. The first months of marriage were a desert of silence. The nights with Rahim were cold and silent. He would come to my room, do what he called husbandly duty, and leave without even looking me in the eye. Not a word, not a gesture of affection. Just the sound of the door closing and the emptiness embracing me again. I would kneel on the floor, my face wet with tears, begging God for a child. The pressure was suffocating. With each passing month without pregnancy, I felt as if I were being handed another sentence of failure. A year later, I finally got pregnant. The whole house was filled with joy, prayers, and anticipation. But 3 months later, everything came crashing down. I lost the baby. The world seemed to crumble beneath my feet. The second pregnancy lasted even less. The third ended before 6 weeks. Each loss was a blow, and along with the pain came whispers. Punishment for some sin, my mother-in-law would say to visitors, not even trying to hide it. I became a burden, a silent shame. Rahim withdrew more and more, and began talking openly about taking another wife if I didn't give him an heir. The nights became eternal. I lay awake in the dark, staring at the ceiling, my heart heavy and my body heavy. I prayed until my knees ached, fasted until I felt weak. But Allah seemed distant, as if he had turned his face away from me. The emptiness in my belly echoed the emptiness in my soul. I began to wonder if there really was a God who cared about the pain of an invisible woman like me. Then, without warning, my 4th pregnancy arrived. This time, Something inside me told me it would be different. The baby seemed to fight for life with a strength that came from above. The first trimester passed, then the second, and I reached the 8th month with my heart full of hope. The house became a whirlwind of preparations. Hand-embroidered clothes, colorful blankets, endless prayers. Everyone was expecting a boy, the long-awaited heir. But deep down, I knew this child wouldn't be just another one. He would come to change everything. That freezing March morning, the pains began. They were waves of fire tearing through my body. Each contraction felt like it ripped a piece of my soul away. Rahim ran to get the mother, and together they took me to Al-Jina Hospital, the same one where I had lost the other babies. The strong smell of disinfectant mingled with the fear that hung in the air. The white lights in the hallways reflected off the pale green walls, and my moans mingled with the cries of newborns coming from other rooms. I remember my mother-in-law, Fatima, pacing back and forth, her gold bracelets jingling with each nervous step. Her lips moved in silent prayer. Rahim, on the other hand, sat motionless in a plastic chair, his head bowed and his hands clasped, swaying slightly, as if trying to negotiate with the heavens. It was as if everyone there was searching for something: control, hope, salvation. But no one dared speak. Labor lasted 14 hours. 14 hours of excruciating pain, of a body and soul torn apart. But with each contraction came a spark of hope. I believed that when it was all over, I would finally hold in my arms the baby who would justify my existence. The child who would give me value, a voice, and perhaps even a little love. When the time came, I felt like I was giving up the last piece of myself. Dr. Hamid, a man with a gray beard and a tired look, took over the delivery. Beside him, the midwife, Soraya, a robust woman with kind eyes, held my hand and said softly, "Hang in there, my daughter. You're almost there." And I pushed with everything I had, with every unanswered prayer, with every silent tear swallowed. "The head is coming," someone said. A shiver ran through me. I was so close to holding the reason I still breathed. But instead of the crying I'd been waiting for, there was silence. Not that calm silence, but a screaming silence, one that tore the air. My chest froze. "Why isn't she crying?" I asked, my voice trembling, my throat dry, my heart pounding like a drum. I tried to get up, but my body was no longer responding. Before they said anything, I already knew. It was a girl, not the son everyone expected. And there was something else, something no one wanted to say. I saw the doctor exchange a tense look with Soraya. He took a small flashlight from his pocket and passed it over my daughter's eyes. His face hardened. "There's a problem," he murmured, wrapping the baby in a blue blanket. She didn't respond to the light. My heart already knew, but I whispered anyway. "What does that mean?" He took a deep breath and replied, "Congenital blindness." Those words fell on me like stones. The doctor continued, "We need to confirm with tests, but the absence of pupillary response is a very clear sign." In that moment, the world stopped. The sounds of the hospital faded. What remained was the sound of my own heart, pounding as if it were about to explode. It wasn't just my daughter's life that was at stake. It was mine too. Everything I had endured, every loss, every humiliation, seemed to converge on that moment. And now, there she was. A blind girl, a source of shame to others, but a miracle to me. When they placed my daughter in my arms, something inexplicable happened. My hands trembled, but my heart filled with a peace I had never felt before. "Can I hold her?" I asked through sobs. The doctor hesitated, but then nodded. When they finally placed her in my arms, the whole world disappeared. It was just me and her. My daughter had the most beautiful little face I'd ever seen. Skin the color of the chai my mother made on cold mornings, her tiny hands moving in the air, as if searching for something the world couldn't yet give. Her eyes remained closed. It wasn't sleep. It was destiny. It was as if my daughter simply refused to open her eyes to a world that had already caused her pain before she even saw it. My little Noor, I whispered, pressing my lips to her warm forehead. The name escaped my mouth like a prayer. Noor, my light. Even without seeing the light of this world, there was a different light in her, inexplicable. A gentle presence that silenced my pain, if only for a moment. But that moment was short-lived. Rahim entered the room with firm steps, followed by his mother, Fatima. There was anxiety on their faces, but as soon as the doctor explained what had happened, their looks changed. Expectation turned to something icy, cruel. Rahim repeated the word blind as if it were a curse. Blind, he said aloud, his voice rising with anger. This is a punishment from Allah. Try to calm down, Rahim, I pleaded, searching for a shred of compassion in his eyes. He interrupted me with a brusque gesture. My body reacted instinctively, cringing. You have sinned, Aisha. This is your fault. Allah is punishing us for some mistake of yours. Fatima murmured verses from the Quran, as if she could erase reality with sacred words. When she learned she was a girl, and blind too, she clutched her chest as if the world had collapsed. A daughter, and a disabled one. What will people say? She repeated, like a mantra of shame. The following days were a mixture of pain and disbelief. The hospital became a cold prison. Each medical examination was a sentence. Confirmation came quickly. Noor was indeed blind. Congenital blindness, they said. An irreversible malformation of the optic nerves. Nothing could be done. No surgery, no hope. It was final. Rahim rarely appeared anymore. And when he did, he barely looked at his daughter. It seemed her mere presence was a constant reminder of his frustration. As a man, as a father, as a Muslim. Fatima, however, was even crueler. You brought dishonor to this house, she said bluntly one morning. Wasn't it enough to give us a girl? She had to be a defective girl. And even though everyone rejected her, Noor would cry softly at night. When I rocked her, her crying would stop. It was as if, even without seeing the world, she saw me in a way no one else ever had. And it was there, in that icy silence of motherhood, amidst the contempt of my own family, that something began to shift within me. There was no thunder or voices from the sky. Just one question, simple but insistent. Is there a God who sees me, even when everyone treats me as invisible? On the third day, Rahim entered the room with a hard look in his eyes and said, as if delivering a sentence, "This child is a curse. Blind girls are a burden. Who will want to marry her? What enormous dowry will we have to pay for someone to accept her?" Each word he said was a stone thrown at me. I was already weak, and each sentence tore me apart. The nurses tried to be kind, offering polite smiles and pats on the shoulder, but their eyes said it all. Pity. A sad, silent compassion that hurt more than any words. But there was one nurse who was different. Her name was Sarah. She worked the night shift when the hospital was plunged into silence. There was something in her gaze, a genuine, unforgiving sweetness, a peace I couldn't understand. One such night, as I was feeding Noor a bottle, warm milk dribbling from the corners of her mouth, Sarah leaned in close and said softly, "Look at her, how she snuggles against you. She knows you're her home, her safe haven." "But she's blind," I replied, my voice breaking. "My family says this is Allah's punishment for some sin of mine." Sarah sat in a plastic chair beside the bed. Her eyes, a serene blue, shone with a light that seemed to come from elsewhere. "In my faith," she said, choosing her words carefully, "we believe that God does not punish the innocent for the mistakes of others. Sometimes trials come so that His glory may be manifested in ways we do not yet understand." I remained silent, staring at that calm face. "Your faith?" I asked, already suspecting the answer. She smiled, unafraid. "I'm Christian," she replied, even though she knew that in Pakistan, admitting it could be costly. "And I believe in a God who loves all His children, especially those the world rejects, calls weak or worthless." Her words fell into my heart like a seed. It was something small, but alive. A curiosity I couldn't ignore. A glimmer of hope amidst my darkness. I didn't know it yet, but those conversations with Sarah would be the thread that pulled me out of the abyss. When I finally returned home with Noor in my arms, I felt like I'd entered a frozen tomb. There was no joy, no celebration. The silence was so heavy it hurt. The decorations Fatima had prepared to celebrate the birth of a grandson were hastily torn down, as if they'd never been there. I was placed in the smallest room in the house, in the back, away from view, as if Noor and I were a shameful secret to be hidden. The room felt more like a cell than a home. There was only one narrow window that looked out onto a dark alley. The bare, cold walls bore a single painting, a verse from the Quran about Allah's mercy. That word, mercy, seemed so far from my reality that it hurt just to look at it. The first few days were the hardest. Noor barely cried, as if sensing the tension around her. At night, I would rock her in the corner of the room, softly singing the lullabies my mother had taught me as a child. Even in these tender moments, sadness was the constant backdrop. No matter how much I smiled at my daughter, she would never see my face. Rahim started arriving later and later. When I heard his footsteps in the hallway, my heart would race. But he never stopped at our door. It was as if Noor and I had ceased to exist. Fatima, on the other hand, was more direct. During family meals, she would say things like, "Allah tests our patience with certain burdens." When someone asked about the baby, she would change the subject or whisper that the child had health problems. One day, while changing Noor, I overheard a conversation between Rahim and his mother in the hallway. "You should consider a second wife," Fatima said. "This woman has lost 3 babies. Now she's giving us a defective daughter." He replied coldly, "I've already thought about that. I just need to find the right family." "And what will we do with her and the girl?" his mother asked. "You can stay for now," she said, as if deciding to keep a burden until a replacement is found. I lay still, with Noor lying on my chest. The tears flowed uncontrollably, landing on her little head. Then, as if understanding my pain, she let out a soft sound, almost a sweet moan, as if to comfort me. That night, something inside me cried out for help. Not for human help, but for any sign that my life was not doomed to abandonment. It was then that I decided to return to the hospital. I ran into Sarah again, on night duty. As soon as she saw me, her face lit up with a genuine smile. "Aisha, how are you two?" she asked. "We're not well," I replied. And it was as if a dam broke. Everything came rushing out. The rejection, the looks, Rahim's harsh words, the plans for a new wife, the suffocating loneliness. Sarah listened to me attentively, her eyes filled with compassion. She led me to a small, quiet room, away from the busy hallways. She took my hands and said softly, "Aisha, I want to tell you about someone who loves Noor exactly as she is." A lump formed in my throat. "Who could love her?" I asked bitterly. "Not even her own father can look at her without contempt." "Jesus," she replied simply. That name echoed in the air like a stone thrown into a calm lake, creating ripples I couldn't contain. Jesus. I'd heard that name before, in religious classes. The Prophet Isa, servant of Allah, but never from someone close, never from someone personal. "But I'm Muslim," I whispered, almost afraid. Sarah smiled serenely. "I'm not asking you to change your religion," she said. "I'm talking about real, unconditional love. A love that doesn't demand perfection. A love that doesn't condemn a mother for having a blind daughter. A love that sees you, that sees Noor, and calls you both by name." Those words weren't a sermon. They were a quiet explosion inside me. For the first time in a long time, I felt like someone, or maybe someone, really saw me. Sarah began telling me stories about Jesus. She spoke of how he touched the blind and restored their sight, how he embraced lepers whom no one dared touch, how he defended women rejected by society. Each word fell on me like fresh water on dry land. But "What can he do for us?" I asked one night, exhausted. "You can ask him yourself," she replied in that serene tone that seemed to come from another world. "You don't need intermediaries or rituals. You can talk to him like you talk to a friend who loves you." Those words stuck in my head. At night, when Noor finally fell asleep, I would stare at the ceiling, imagining what it would be like to talk to this Jesus Sarah spoke of so tenderly. I started little by little. Instead of the formal prayers I'd repeated my whole life, I began whispering in the darkness, as if someone were there with me. "If you really exist," I murmured, "and if you love my daughter as Sarah says you do, show me. Help me understand why she was born this way. Teach me to be the mother she needs." I didn't expect to hear any answer, but something changed. Each time I said these simple prayers, a gentle peace filled the room. It wasn't like in the mosques, where everything seemed heavy and ritualistic. It was different. It was real. It was as if, suddenly, my words had found attentive ears. Until, one of those nights, something happened. Something that would change my life forever. Noor was especially restless. She cried nonstop, and nothing I did helped. Rahim, enraged, began banging on the wall, yelling at me to quiet the child. Fatima, across the hall, muttered cruel phrases about cursed babies. I couldn't take it anymore. I was exhausted, desperate, alone. And it was then, in the depths of my despair, that I did something I had never done before. I knelt beside Noor's makeshift crib. I placed my hands over her closed eyes, and almost without realizing it, repeated the words Sarah had taught me. "Jesus, if you are truly the Son of God, if you have the power to heal, please let my daughter see." It was a muggy April night. The air felt heavy and humid, like the harbinger of the Pakistani monsoon. The windows were open, but no wind blew in. The heat made sweat drip down my skin, but the chill of fear was even greater. Noor had been crying for over 4 hours, a deep, aching cry that seemed to come from her soul. I had tried everything, changing her diapers, breastfeeding her, rocking her until she lost her strength, singing the songs my mother had taught me. Nothing worked. Her small fists flailed in the air, as if fighting something invisible. Suddenly, the sound of a punch on the wall echoed from the next room. "Shut that child up!" Rahim shouted furiously. "Some of us need to sleep for work tomorrow." His every word pierced the walls like sharp knives, ripping through a heart already shattered. I sat on the edge of the bed, hugging Noor to my chest. We were wet with sweat and tears. Mine mingled with hers, forming a silent river of shared grief. I felt like I was on the edge of an abyss. "I don't know what to do anymore, my little one," I whispered, my voice breaking. "I don't know how to help you, or how to free you from this suffering." It was then that Sarah's words came back to me. The stories about Jesus, the man who touched the blind and restored their sight, who embraced the rejected, who loved the forgotten of the world. The memory of these stories lit a spark in me, a small flame amidst the darkness. With trembling legs, I stood and carefully placed Noor in her box, lined with soft blankets. She continued to cry, her eyes tightly closed, as if refusing to see a world that rejected her. I knelt on the cold floor and, for the first time in my life, spoke to someone other than Allah. "Jesus," I whispered, my voice trembling, mingling with my daughter's sobs. "Sarah said you love children, especially those the world rejects. I don't know how to pray properly, but please, have mercy on my little one." My hands trembled as I touched her eyes. Everything I'd learned about faith and tradition screamed inside me, telling me it was wrong, blasphemous. But a mother's cry is stronger than any doctrine. If you are who Sarah says you are, and if you have the power she spoke of, please heal my daughter. Have mercy on my innocent child. Her crying began to lessen, not because I rocked her or sang, but because something different was in the air. The room felt denser, yet lighter at the same time. It was as if an invisible presence had entered. "She didn't do anything wrong," I whispered. "If anyone deserves punishment, it's me. But please, don't make her suffer for my mistakes." My tears turned into prayer. Not a memorized prayer, but a cry from the soul. For the first time, I spoke to Jesus as someone alive, present, able to hear. "If you really healed the blind," as Sarah said, "then please let my daughter see the light you created." As I spoke, something shifted in the air. It wasn't just the warm Pakistani night, it was alive. A different warmth enveloped me, soft, welcoming. A warmth that didn't burn, but comforted. A warmth that seemed to come from a love I'd never felt before. "In the name of Jesus," I whispered, trying to remember the words Sarah used in her prayers. "I humbly ask you, heal my daughter. Open her eyes so she can see your light." I knelt there, my hands on her tiny eyelids, not daring to breathe. My heart was pounding so hard it felt like it was about to explode. For a few seconds, which felt like an eternity, nothing happened. Only Noor's crying, which gradually turned into small sobs. And then, the impossible happened. Slowly, like a flower opening at sunrise, her eyelids began to move. First a slight tremble, then a small lift. I blinked, thinking it was my imagination. But no, they were truly opening. When her eyes fluttered open, I gasped. They were no longer the dull, distant eyes from the hospital. They were brown, alive, bright, full of light. Trembling, I moved my hand in front of her little face. To my surprise, her eyes followed the movement. She could see me. "My God," I whispered, almost voiceless. "My God, she can see." Noor looked at me and smiled. Not that involuntary newborn smile, but a real, knowing smile, full of recognition, as if she knew I had fought for her. Her eyes shone as if touched by the sky itself. I hugged my daughter with trembling hands, a mixture of joy, amazement, and reverence. Noor stared at me, following every movement of my face. When I brought my finger close to her little face, her eyes focused precisely, and she tried to grasp it with her fragile little hands. "Thank you," I whispered, looking up at the cracked ceiling, but knowing exactly who I was addressing. I couldn't see that presence, but it was more real than everything around me. "Thank you, Jesus. Thank you for hearing the cry of a desperate mother." I spent the rest of the night in tears of gratitude and a state of pure wonder. It was as if the world had taken on new colors. I still didn't fully understand who this Jesus Sarah spoke of was, but a certainty burned within me. He had heard me. Noor slept soundly that night, for the first time in weeks, and I lay there, awake, standing beside the crib, watching every movement, my heart pounding between adoration and fear. Every few minutes, I passed my hand before her eyes, just to be sure. Even drowsy, her eyes followed the movement of my hand. It was real. She could see it. But as dawn painted the sky golden, a worry began to grow within me. Along with joy came fear. How would I explain this miracle to my family? How could I tell them that for this to happen, I had prayed to Jesus? In a culture where abandoning Islam is considered treason, a crime that can cost one's life, I decided for now to keep this secret to myself. I tried to convince myself I could hide it, but I knew it wouldn't be for long. A sighted baby behaves differently. Soon, everyone would notice. The following days were a mixture of joy and tension. Noor began to react to the world as never before. She followed my face as I moved around the room, enchanted by the shadows the sun cast on the walls. She reached out her little hands for the colorful mobiles above the crib and smiled at the beams of light dancing across the floor. It was impossible to hide such an obvious miracle, and it ended up being revealed in the worst possible way a week later. It all happened on a sweltering Friday. Fatima had gone out to visit a sick neighbor, and I was in the front room, breastfeeding Noor. Suddenly, the door burst open. It was Yasmin, Rahim's sister, a nosy woman known for showing up unannounced and rummaging through every corner of the house like an inspector looking for something amiss. Her gold bracelets jingled, and her silk scarf fluttered behind her like a war flag. "Where's that troubled child?" she asked without even greeting me, advancing toward me. Before I could react, she leaned over the crib and began waving her hand in front of Noor's eyes, trying to confirm what everyone else believed: blindness. But to her surprise, and my utter despair, my daughter's eyes followed her every movement, fixated on her face with the innocent curiosity of any baby. Yasmin paled, her mouth hanging open, unable to believe what she was seeing. "What? How is this possible?" she murmured, her voice trembling. It was at that moment that Fatima returned, her hands still wet from the ablution of the afternoon prayer. Her gaze, cold and suspicious, immediately fell on us. "What's going on here?" she asked sharply. Yasmin, still in shock, replied, "The child, she can see. She sees everything, like any normal baby." The silence that followed was heavy, almost palpable. Fatima approached with firm steps and repeated the same gesture, moving her hand in front of Noor's eyes. The reaction was immediate. My daughter followed the movement attentively. The verdict was undeniable. Noor could see it. "That's impossible," Fatima murmured, her expression somber. "The doctor said it was irreversible." I tried to hide it, my voice wavering. Maybe it was a mistake. Maybe the diagnosis was wrong. But Yasmin, with a mischievous glint in her eye, retorted, "Mistake? They ran several tests, used modern equipment. What exactly did you do, Aisha?" Just then, Rahim walked through the door, still wearing his work clothes, the scent of spices preceding him. "Why are you yelling?" he asked irritably, but he stopped when he sensed the heavy air. "Your wife did something dangerous," Yasmin accused, pointing her finger at me as if I were a criminal. "The girl who was born blind is seeing," as if by magic. Yasmin's words echoed through the room like thunder. Rahim approached slowly, his face hardening with each step. Instinctively, I backed away until my back touched the cold wall. He stared at Noor, watching her eye movements, and an icy expression took over his face. "How is this possible?" he asked in a low, controlled tone, but with a clear threat behind his words. "Explain yourself now, and don't lie." I don't know," I lied, clutching Noor to my chest, trying to shield her from the storm gathering before us. "It's been happening slowly. I don't understand it myself. Things like this don't happen without a reason," Fatima interrupted, her voice thick with accusation and contempt. She simply couldn't accept that something considered irreversible could disappear overnight. Yasmin, with a wicked glint in her eyes, sat on the green velvet sofa and crossed her legs, savoring the chaos. "Maybe she turned to a healer. Or worse, something forbidden," she hinted with venom in her voice. "Black magic, perhaps." "Never!" I shouted, my voice trembling, my heart racing. But fear was already gripping me. Rahim crossed his arms, assuming that rigid posture I knew well, the harbinger of something terrible. "So tell me, what exactly did you do?" he demanded. "And don't tell me nothing happened. We know that's a lie." The interrogation seemed endless. They bombarded me with questions, trying to extract a confession from me. They wanted to know if I had made pacts, if anyone had visited me in secret, if I had mingled with occult forces. With each negative answer, their anger grew, like a flame fanned by the wind, until Fatima asked the question I dreaded most. "Have you been practicing some foreign religion? Are you praying to false gods?" My silence was enough. I saw horrified comprehension spread across their faces like dark clouds before a storm. Yasmin was the first to whisper, her tone poisonous. "Christianity." She spat the word as if it burned her tongue. "You've been praying to Jesus, like the infidels." I couldn't deny it anymore. The tears fell silently, and my voice was weak. Just once. I was desperate. I didn't know what else to do for my daughter. The reaction was immediate and terrifying. Rahim advanced on me with a fury I had never seen before. His eyes burned with hatred. Only the fact that Noor was in my arms stopped him from attacking me. "Traitor!" he shouted. "You brought a demonic curse into this house. You desecrated our faith, our family!" Fatima beat her chest, wailing loudly. "We have become accomplices to apostasy. What will the community say when they learn of this shame?" Meanwhile, Yasmin was already frantically dialing her cell phone. "Everyone needs to know. This is too serious to hide." "No, please," I pleaded, but it was too late. Within minutes, the news spread like wildfire. Each call seemed to make the story more distorted. "She's praying to Jesus," I heard someone shout on the other end of the line. "The girl who was born blind now sees. This isn't a miracle, it's Christian witchcraft. She brought Western demons into a Muslim home." Less than an hour later, the house was packed. Long-bearded uncles, conservative cousins, religious neighbors, all arrived as if they were witnesses to an urgent trial. They sat in a circle in the center of the room, and I, with Noor in my arms, felt like a prisoner surrounded by judges. Rahim's older brother, Tariq, a man with a cold gaze and an authoritative voice, took the floor. "This is clear apostasy," he declared loudly. "She rejected Islam to follow a foreign and inferior religion." Those words echoed like a sentence. To them, what I had done was unforgivable, a betrayal that demanded punishment. "But the child can see now," I tried to argue, holding up Noor as living proof. "That's a blessing, not a curse." "Blessing?" one of the cousins shouted, pointing his finger. "It's a trap of the enemy. Christian spirits have possessed this child. She needs to be purified before she contaminates the whole family." The hours that followed were a nightmare. They made me repeat verses from the Quran, trying to expel the Christian influence from me. I wept silently, holding Noor tightly, while they prayed aloud, as if fighting something invisible. But deep inside, I knew. This wasn't a curse. It was a miracle. And nothing, not even their hatred, could change that truth. They began throwing holy water everywhere, even bringing in an imam from another city especially for the occasion. The men in the family gathered around Noor and me, reciting prayers loudly, shouting, and making sudden gestures, as if trying to drive away some evil spirit. My daughter trembled, crying even louder, terrified by the scene. "You need to divorce her," they told Rahim in unison. "A woman who commits apostasy cannot remain in a respectable Muslim home." "And the child?" I asked, my heart already breaking. The girl was touched by Christian demons. "Who knows what else she might bring?" Fatima replied, without any emotion. "The baby stays here?" Tariq, the older brother, decreed with the coldness of someone deciding the fate of an object. "She will be raised in the true faith, away from the corrupting influence of this apostate mother. And as for you," he paused, looking at me with contempt, "you will leave this house tonight, alone." "No!" I screamed, my voice breaking into 1,000 pieces. I hugged Noor so tightly to my chest that she cried even harder. "Please, don't take her away from me. She's all I have in this world." Rahim, his face impassive, replied in a cold, almost robotic tone. "You have a choice. Completely renounce this foreign religion. Return to Islam with complete submission, and perhaps we can forgive you after a period of penance. But if you persist in this blasphemy, know that today you will leave this house, and you will never see your daughter again." His words cut through the air like a blade. Fatima nodded, satisfied with the sentence, while Yasmin smirked, savoring the chaos she had wrought. The men in the family crossed their arms, watching me like predators waiting for the right moment to strike. I looked at Noor. Her eyes shone with a pure, innocent trust that broke my heart. She didn't know the world around her was about to collapse, that her future and mine would be marked by a struggle that had barely begun. And it was at that moment that my thoughts turned to Jesus, to that desperate prayer that transformed everything, to the quiet peace I felt when the miracle happened. "I can't," I murmured, my voice firm, coming from the depths of my soul. "I won't deny what I saw, what I experienced, what my heart knows to be true. Jesus healed my daughter. even when everyone here rejected her. The roar of indignation that followed was deafening. Shouts, threats, hateful looks. But before fear overcame me, before the urge to give in made me retreat, I stood up. With Noor in my arms, I walked to the door. Each step was a goodbye to the life I knew, a break with the past. "If this is your final decision," Rahim shouted, his voice poisoned with spite, "then you are dead to us. You have no family, no home, no name. Never speak our names again." The sound of the door slamming behind me was like the end of an era. The end of the 22 years I'd lived there, and the beginning of a journey filled with uncertainty, but also with a hope I couldn't explain. On that cold April night, when Noor and I left everything behind, I had nowhere to go. I walked the streets of Lahore with my daughter in my arms and a small bag containing what little I could carry: a few clothes, a blanket, and the money I'd been secretly saving. The city lights shone, but my heart was plunged into deep shadows. My family would choose Rahim, and my few friends belonged to the same closed circle that now rejected me. But there was one person I could trust: Sarah, the nurse who had planted the first seed of faith in me. I arrived at Al Jina Hospital after midnight, exhausted, with Noor crying from the cold and hunger. Sarah was on duty. When she saw me, her gaze filled with compassion and understanding. She didn't need me to say anything. She simply asked softly, "You prayed to Jesus, didn't you?" I just nodded, tears falling silently. Sarah came over, took Noor in her arms, and held her tenderly. "So now," she said, smiling sweetly, "you belong to his family." I just nodded, unable to say a word. Sarah looked at me tenderly and said she already knew about the miracle, the prayer, the expulsion, and the judgment I had faced. "Come with me," she said firmly. "I know a safe place for you and your daughter." She took me to a Christian shelter on the outskirts of Lahore, a simple 2-story house painted white, with a small garden where the scent of roses and jasmine filled the air. For the first time in a long time, I felt a glimmer of peace and protection. When we arrived, a woman named Ruth greeted us with a welcoming smile. Even though it was late at night, she hugged me as if she'd known me for years and gently took Noor in her arms. "You're safe here," she assured me. "Many women like you have passed through these doors, women who chose to follow Jesus, even knowing the price it would cost." The first few days were a whirlwind of emotions. The pain of being away from my family was real, a raw wound in my soul. I cried at night, not only for what I had lost, but for the uncertain future that awaited me. And yet, in the midst of that pain, I began to feel a peace I had never experienced before. There, I could pray without fear, without needing to hide. Ruth taught me more about Jesus, about his unconditional love, about his sacrifice on the cross, and about how he understood rejection like no one else. Even his own family rejected him, she said one afternoon as we read the Bible in the shelter's garden. The authorities persecuted him, and he was crucified for claiming to be the Son of God. But even so, he never stopped loving. That's how I began to pray in a new way. No longer repeating memorized words, but talking to Jesus as one would with a close friend. I told him my fears, my hopes for Noor, the pain of separation, and also my gratitude for the miracle that had transformed our lives. Little by little, I began to feel his presence vividly, constantly, like a gentle warmth within my chest. The shelter became my new home. There I met other women with stories of pain and resilience. There was Miriam, a widow cast out by her in-laws after converting. Esther, a young woman who had fled an abusive marriage. And Priscilla, who had left prostitution and found dignity in Christ. Together, we formed a family, caring for each other, sharing burdens, and celebrating every small victory. Noor became their treasure, receiving the love that had previously been denied her. It was Priscilla who suggested I change my name. "Fatima was who you were," she said sweetly. "But now you are a new creation in Christ." I chose the name Miriam, in honor of Moses' sister, the one who protected her brother and celebrated the people's liberation. It seemed the perfect name for a woman who now protected her daughter and celebrated her own freedom. I got a job at a textile factory that supported the women at the shelter. The work was grueling, long hours sewing, but honest. It was a blessing to be able to support Noor and, at the same time, contribute to the place that had welcomed me. But the greatest transformation happened when I started sharing my story with other women at weekly meetings. Ruth encouraged me to share the miracle. "Your testimony is powerful," she said. "God used your daughter's pain to manifest His glory, and now He's using your voice to touch hearts." Every time I told about the night I cried out to Jesus and saw Noor's eyes open, tears filled the eyes of my listeners. Many later came to me, wanting to know more about this Jesus of love and power. Of course, not everything was easy. Sometimes the threats returned. Anonymous calls, notes left on the shelter door, hateful messages. But even in the face of this, I felt God was with me, guiding every step. One morning, we found a note written in shaky handwriting. "Gamblers like you don't deserve to live." Ruth took the threat seriously and reinforced the security of the shelter. But she reminded me of something essential. Fear cannot steal your faith. Jesus warned that following Him would come at a price, but He also promised He would never abandon us. Meanwhile, Noor grew strong and healthy. Those eyes that had been born blind now shone with life and intelligence. She was a happy girl, surrounded by affection, as if her dark past had never existed. When Noor turned 1, I received an unexpected visitor, my younger sister. She had managed to reach the shelter through discreet contacts. She wore black clothes and seemed tense, as if simply being there was dangerous. "Mommy and Daddy sent me a message that there's still time for you to return," she said in a cold, direct tone. I asked about Rahim. "He remarried 3 months ago. His new wife is 18 and already pregnant." To my surprise, the news didn't hurt as I'd imagined. On the contrary, I felt a calm relief, as if a painful chapter in my life had finally closed. "Tell them I'm okay," I replied. "Tell them Noor is cured, that she can see, and that she's loved." She looked at me confused. "But at what price?" she asked. I smiled with tears in my eyes and hugged my daughter. "I've lost so much," I confessed. "My family, my security, my old life. But I've gained something worth more than anything. I've found the truth. Truth, peace, and a love that doesn't depend on anything. That's what I found." My sister left without another word. But before she left, she took one last look at Noor. In her eyes there was admiration, almost reverence. That look was living proof of the miracle that had transformed our lives. 4 years have passed since that night that changed everything. Noor and I now live in a simple little house near the shelter. I work as a coordinator, helping women who, like me, are trying to start over. Noor attends a Christian school where she learns, grows, and is loved exactly as she is, without having to hide her story. Every night before she falls asleep, I watch her eyes. The same eyes that were once born blind and now clearly see the beauty of this world God created. And, silently, I say a prayer of gratitude. Thank you, Jesus, for holding us in the darkness. Thank you for showing your power in the weakness of a desperate mother. Thank you for proving that your love is stronger than any rejection, more powerful than any threat, and more enduring than any loss. Sometimes I wonder what would have become of us if I had never met Sarah, if I had never heard of Jesus' love, if I had simply accepted that Noor's blindness was a permanent fate. But then I look at her running through the garden, laughing, her eyes shining with life, and I understand. Every sacrifice was worth it. Yes, the price of following Christ was high. I lost my family, my security, my former identity. But I gained something no one can ever take from me. The freedom to be who I am, the joy of seeing my daughter healed, and the peace of knowing the true God. My story continues. Each day brings new challenges, new opportunities to share this hope, and more chances to see God at work, transforming lives. The women who come to the shelter seeking a new beginning remind me of where I came from. And Noor, my light, my living miracle, is a daily reminder of the power of a prayer of faith. Today she knows she is loved, not just by me, but by Jesus, the one who opened her eyes when all seemed lost, the same Jesus who illuminates all who live in darkness. Thank you, Lord, for never abandoning your children.